Welcome to RA 101. This presentation is a video, so you can feel free to pause or rewind at any time if you need to stop. It will take less than 20 minutes to watch this entire presentation. There will be an assignment at the end, so please be sure to read and listen carefully. If you get stuck, you can always go back and rewatch the video. In this online session, you will review the responsibilities of the RA role, understand how living communities develop and operate within the Office of Residential Life and Housing Services, or ORLHS, and you'll hear some personal advice by former and current RAs. Let's begin. We know that as an NYU student, you're committed to a number of different organizations and to your academics, but we want to remind you that the RA position is a job. It is a part-time compensated student position that requires roughly 20 hours per week. As an RA, you'll need to be both a multitasker and a time manager, and you'll have to find that balance between academics and other commitments. What we really want you to know, though, is that as an RA, if you're communicating with your supervisors, we'll work together to ensure success. We'll make sure that everything is balanced and that you'll be able to succeed as a student and as an RA. We also want to point out that as we're going through this presentation, you'll notice a number of little paper clips on the different slides representing the different pieces of the presentation. Those are actually pieces of the job description that you received once you accepted the position. You'll see that, and that'll help you make those connections between the work you're doing and the concepts we're talking about. We'll be introducing the RA position to you using Tuckman's model of group development. Tuckman's model says that communities go through 5 stages as they develop. Next year, you'll see your communities, whether it be your floor, your building, or your staff community, go through these different stages. The first stage you'll experience is forming. Forming occurs when you establish relationships with leaders, organizational standards, and each other. As I mentioned earlier, you'll notice the paperclip section is actually taken right from your job description. You'll continue to see this as you go through the presentation. During forming, we want you to think about a community that you've belonged to either now or in the past. Why did you become a member of that community? What appealed to you about that community? How did you contribute to that community? And what did you take away from that community? Considering that, how might you use these past experiences to shape your community in the fall? Think about that question as we introduce you to our department's mission and values. Our ORLHS mission states that we are committed to providing quality services and programs that enhance residential student success in safe and inclusive living, learning communities. Our department has 5 key values. The first, inclusive community. We are committed to creating a community that values the diversity of students, staff, and New York City while promoting the development of students in becoming global citizens. Our second value is a student-centered philosophy. We are committed to a student-centered approach in the development of programs and services that contribute to a holistic student experience. Our focus is the development of individuals that accept responsibility for personal and group decision-making, mutual respect and concern, and a sense of accountability and cooperation. Our third value is learning. We are committed to providing living, learning environments that foster the educational mission of NYU and are grounded in student development theory. Innovation is our fourth value. We are committed to being adaptable to the changing needs of our students and our profession while focusing on creating cutting-edge programs and services. We value a forward-thinking approach encouraging scholarship, collaboration, continuous innovation, and community partnerships. Our final value is wellness. We are committed to providing an environment that supports the wellness needs of our students, staff, and community members. We invest in safety, self-care, and well-being of all. Here are some active ways that you can build community. We call these our active initiatives. Fall opening day is the first time you'll meet your residents as they're moving in. You only get one chance to make a first impression, so this is your chance to do that. Floor meetings. This is your first time where you're with your entire floor together, so you'll use this opportunity to build connections and establish standards for your community. Programming is a fun way to build community. This involves bonding over shared experiences where your residents will have that common experience and will hopefully get exposed to some new ideas in the process. Most buildings have a first 6 weeks plan or focus, in which you'll probably have to do one program every week. This sets the tone for engagement early on. Residents will be more likely to stay invested in the year if you set that tone in the beginning. Establishing an open door policy can be a great way to build community. Open doors lead to open environments, and hopefully your residents will interact more. Base conversations are hugely important in developing your community. It's really your market research. You'll get to know your residents and what they want and need over the course of the year. Use this information to make connections with you, but also connections with other residents. This is a great way to build community. The Resource Center is another great place to build community because it's where you'll get to see the entire building community. So this is your opportunity to move beyond your floor community and get to meet other people within the larger context. Quality service. We've all had bad days, and that one person that just smiles at you or something can really change the way your day goes. So providing quality service is another tool to enhance your community. And lastly, we have policy enforcement. Maintaining community standards creates a safe environment for all the other great initiatives you get to use. Make sure that you're enforcing your policy strictly in the beginning to make sure that your residents understand what's expected of them. These are some passive ways you can build community, or our passive initiatives. First, everyone's favorite, bulletin boards. These are great tools to convey information, encourage interaction, and shape the physical space to be warm and welcoming. Door decorations actually visually demonstrate that your residents are members of the community. One note on door decorations, you'll want to make them age appropriate. Childlike decorations can encourage childlike behavior. We don't want that in our community. We all know email is a great way to communicate, so you'll be sending emails to your floor. Make sure that they're fun and engaging, because you want your residents to read them. You can also utilize email to virtually introduce residents with similar interests. Lastly, take advantage of that social media. We all know that a majority of residents interact using these platforms, so set up a Facebook group, use Twitter or Tumblr to engage with your community and help them become members of that community. The following slides will introduce you to some examples of good passive initiatives. This slide in particular shows some really great door decorations. This slide is a good bulletin board. This bulletin board has an interactive element. Residents are able to write notes to each other and drop them on that bulletin board, so it's almost like a daily mailbox. In this bulletin board, the RA has chosen to include neighborhood eateries so that you can find inexpensive places to eat around the city. Here's one of my favorite educational bulletin boards, Tyrannosaurus Sex. Notice how the RAs used a creative way to present educational information. Lastly, this is an entire theme that was done on a floor. So there's an introductory bulletin board that just sets the tone. You'll see the door decorations are all famous video game characters, and the other bulletin board is about conflict resolution. This whole theme works really well to build communities and shape the physical space. Now that we've introduced you to some of the tools that we've used, we'd like to introduce you to some of our current RAs. They're going to tell you a little bit about how they use these tools to shape their experiences.
Actually, taking the initiative to go in and introduce yourself to someone is extremely awkward, and a lot of people are really uncomfortable with it. So what I did is I had a block party where I made spaghetti and meatballs, and I put the plates in one room, and then across the hall was the cups, and then in another room was the drinks, and the noodles were in one room, and the sauce was in another, and I made every room participate. And like most people were up for it anyway, but they met everybody all throughout the whole floor. So I've actually had so many residents that have told me that like they didn't meet this person until then, and you know they're living together next year, and just like creating that common ground for everyone to feel comfortable is just something that has been really, really effective. Also, my first floor meeting, I had it in the hallway and had them sign up for their base conversations in my room. That way they knew that they could come in at any time they wanted to come in, and they had already broken that barrier. Instead of it just being awkward, I've never seen your room, who are you? It's like, it was more welcoming and saying that this space is your space too. So
that's really important. That I really commend is being really present, especially during the first 6 weeks. Like, be on your floor a lot. Like, make time to just be on your floor. Keep that door open because you're gonna get so much, and your residents will see that you're present, but you're gonna get so much just picking up a lot of intuitive things just by being around the floor a lot, especially during the first 6 weeks.
I think you should also use social media. I mean, if you have a group, a Facebook group or any sort of Twitter group, like your residents will, give feedback there. They talk to each other. They talk to you. You can gauge what they're, thinking, what they think about other programs. You can ask them, what they thought of a certain program, what they think about an idea that you have.
Now that your community is formed, it will naturally move on to the next stage.
Storming. The storming phase is characterized by intergroup conflict, a lack of unity, and polarization around interpersonal issues. We can guarantee that at some point during the year, you will run into some conflict in your community. But don't worry, it is completely normal. And the good thing is, we hired you because we feel confident that you are capable to handle these situations. The storming phase can manifest itself in many different ways in your community, such as a roommate conflict, an act of vandalism on your floor, hurtful language, a bias incident, a wellness issue, or it could even happen with interstaff conflict. As an RA, it's important to note that you are not there to solve every problem, but to act as a peer helper for residents and to serve as a resource or to direct residents to the appropriate resources so that you can help them solve their own problems. Sometimes addressing these issues can be stressful, and so we want to help best prepare you to deal with these conflicts. Now I want to give you some skills to listen and respond like an RA. To begin, let's start with listening. The following are going to be some nonverbal skills that you can utilize: maintaining eye contact, keeping open body language, and acknowledging. Each of these helps the resident understand that you are present and engaged with the conversation, and that you are also an active participant. Another nonverbal skill that you can use is the room setup. You want to make sure that you're not literally siding with someone by sitting next to them during a roommate conversation. Have the roommates sit equidistant from each other and try to have the meeting in neutral ground, like in your room or a study lounge. Now let's think of going beyond the words. What did or didn't the resident say? Is the resident clearly upset but they haven't told you exactly why? Maybe you need to ask some more exploratory questions. How did the resident express feeling to you? Did they tell you that everything was okay, but they're visibly emotional and they're crying? Because it sounds like then you do need to ask a few more questions. And what did the resident's body language tell you? Are they closed off, not making any eye contact, sitting in a very defensive position with their arms and legs crossed? Perhaps there's someone else they'd be more comfortable talking to. Now we're going to review how you can respond like an RA. So a lot of these skills are going to involve repeating back to the resident what they've told you. And this is mostly to make sure that you understand what the issues are. So paraphrasing, saying in different words what someone else has said to you. Reflecting, mirroring back to someone what they're feeling. So it sounds like you feel upset because you failed the exam, etc., etc. Use clarifying questions so that you can understand exactly what the person is saying if you aren't sure. And lastly, make sure to use open-ended questions. These kind of questions elicit more than just a yes or no response. Now that we've given you some helpful hints about how to listen and respond like an RA, we also want to give you some possible roadblocks to helping. These could take the form of advising or telling others what they should or shouldn't do. This could also be judging, telling others that what they did was good or bad or right or wrong. We make sure not to interpret what our residents are saying or telling them the reason that they did something or why they feel the way that they do. We want to make sure not to warn residents that something bad is going to happen to them if they act a certain way. We want to make sure we don't deny residents' feelings or telling them that they shouldn't feel the way that they do. We want to differentiate between empathy and sympathy. Whereas empathy is genuinely understanding where someone is coming from, sympathy is telling them that you feel sorry or bad for them. We also want to make sure not to abruptly change the subject, as we want the resident to feel comforted and cared for in the situation. Once again, now that you've seen some of the tools that we use to address conflict, we want you to listen to some current RAs share their experiences with the storming phase.
One of the things is really to keep track and follow up. So when you have these conversations, and hopefully when you fill out a roommate agreement, some of the halls it's not mandatory, but try and really tell them that it's a really good idea to fill out that roommate agreement, to get an idea of who they are as people and where they might run into conflict with each other, and then follow up with them with those things. So if they do run into a conflict that you handled in September, and you resolved it, check in in a couple weeks and say, hey, like, is everything still going well? Are these solutions still working for you? And checking up with them just to make sure that you didn't leave them hanging. You're not like, oh, I resolved your situation, great. See you in a couple months when you have another problem. Maybe preventing that by following with them first.
One of the tools that have really helped me with especially roommate conflicts is roommate agreement forms, which I used to never fill those out when I was actually a resident, but they're your best friend basically. It's about 3/4 of roommate conflicts can be solved just by referring back to the roommate agreement. If they didn't write one, sitting down and writing one with them and helping them through it, or sort of just tweaking it a little bit, just so it really just fixes the problem.
We hope that you now feel more competent handling conflict in your community. And now that brings us to the next stage.
Norming. Roles and norms are established. Group members accept each other's idiosyncrasies and express personal opinions. As an RA, you are immediately in a position of power within your community. You control the environment, enforce standards, and set the norms or standards of accepted behavior within your community. Being inclusive is an important part of your job. We want you to do everything that you can to be mindful of the social identities of the members of your community. So what exactly do we mean by social identities? Social identity is defined as our identities within the context of the different social groups that we belong to, such as ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, gender, class, occupation, disability status, religion, and nationality. Social identities can also be referred to as group identities, as these societal groupings have a relationship to power, privilege, or subordination in the larger society. Now we'd like to differentiate between personal identity and social identity. Personal identities are characteristics or groups to which we belong that are not associated with power or privilege in society. For example, you may be a skateboarder, but skateboarding does not afford you added power in society. Social identities are characteristics or social groups to which we belong that are associated with power or privilege. For example, in many societies there is power associated with gender or sex. Men may have greater access and power in society, while the same may not be true of women. Other examples of social identities are race, sexual orientation, and class. The chart on the left will provide you with additional examples of social identity. Over the next few slides, we're going to show you some scenarios that deal with being an inclusive RA. When we use the word inclusive, we truly mean being inclusive of various social identities. Each of these scenarios is a realistic situation in which you might find yourself within your community. For example, you are designing your bulletin board for August Move-In Day. You want to create a board that is interactive and helps residents get to know each other. You decide to make a map and have residents put a pin indicating where they are from. You draw a beautiful map of the United States and put out pins and directions for Move-In Day. Why might this not be inclusive? If you're a student who's not from the United States, you may not feel included because your home country is not represented. A more inclusive idea would be to use a map of the world instead. See if you can figure out why the next few examples might not be inclusive of residents' social identities. You'll also want to think about how you can make them more inclusive. The icebreaker. You're serving as a co-advisor for Hall Council. Your supervisor asks you to decide on a fun icebreaker for the first e-board meeting. You decide to play Celebrity Crush, whereby each student shares his or her celebrity crush from past or present. Why might this not be inclusive? In this scenario, your residents may be forced to disclose their sexual orientation. Icebreakers should make people feel more comfortable, and this might have the opposite effect. Additionally, the concept of celebrity may be different based on your country of origin. A more inclusive idea would be to ask people to share a personal hero. The flyer. You're creating a flyer for your first floor event of the semester, and you decide to host Bacon Fest, celebrating everyone's favorite food. Your flyer asks, "Who doesn't like bacon?" and ends with the tag, "Don't be lame, come meet people and enjoy everyone's favorite food." Why might this not be inclusive? There are 3 concerns in this scenario. Number 1, food options. Many people are unable to eat bacon due to dietary or religious restrictions. For example, Muslim and Jewish students, who may keep halal or kosher, do not generally eat pork products. Second, the religious imagery may discourage some residents from participating. And third, the use of the word lame has implications in regards to physical ability. Possible ways to change this program would be to include a variety of breakfast foods, including different types of meat-free options. The poster and language used can be changed to be more inclusive as well. The door decks. You're an RA for an explorations-themed community, music in New York City. You decide to make your door decks based on famous music icons throughout the history of New York City. You choose 4 icons from different periods and genres: Jimi Hendrix, Madonna, Jay-Z, and Billie Holiday. Since they are female, you will use pictures of Billie Holiday and Madonna for your female suites, and pictures of Jimi Hendrix and Jay-Z for your male suites. Why might this not be inclusive? Placing gender-specific door decorations on residents' doors may not be inclusive of students who do not identify with the binary gender norms of male and female. These artists do not represent a wide variety of musical styles or artists as well. A more inclusive approach might be to use buildings that have historical musical importance, such as Radio City Music Hall or Webster Hall, or to consider individual songs instead of artists. The other door decks. Since you're such a dedicated RA, you start working on your door decks over the summer. You decide to have a 90s theme for your floor, so your door decks will be pictures of characters from the following shows: Boy Meets World, Full House, Friends, and Home Improvement. Why might these not be inclusive? These door decorations represent a specific economic and racial demographic. The characters are generally white, middle to upper middle class, and from nuclear families. Consider using different television shows from around the world or that represent a broader demographic. Still unsure on how you can be an inclusive RA? Wondering if your door decorations or bulletin boards are inclusive? Ask your RHD or RHAD. Remember, we don't expect you to instantly become experts of inclusivity. It takes time and practice. We do want you to continue thinking about these ideas over the summer and throughout the year while you're establishing your community. Now that we've seen some of the tools we use to be inclusive, listen to some current RAs as they share their experiences.
Like socioeconomic class, which is something that I try and keep in mind. Sorry, I don't want to I try and keep in mind with all programs. When you're doing budget and stuff, like you have the floor budget, there's also the hall council and everything. Whichever program that you do, if it requires a copay of some sort, you can ask your RHD or the hall council for just a little bit of extra money in the event that a student can't afford that copay. Housing is thousands of dollars a semester. Doesn't mean that they can do even a $5 copay. So just having that as an option always is just very safe. Making sure that it won't be disclosed to anyone else. So if you come to us, that it won't be oh, here you needed the voucher. Don't do that. And just say that it'll stay
And then something that I always try to be very conscious of is the language that I'm using, not only in verbal communication, but also emails and program marketing and even titles of programs. So an example of that would be, instead of saying speed dating, which could kind of be heteronormative, and also it might be taboo in certain cultures to talk about dating. So instead of that, you could use a title like speed meeting or speed friendly to kind of be more inclusive and neutral.
And another thing is physical ability. A lot of people, for elevator etiquette, some people might live on the second floor and they take the elevator. Restrain from making certain comments because you don't know if they have a physical disability.
Great work! You've done a great job establishing norms and building an inclusive community. So what stage comes next? Performing. Performing is characterized by members adapting task-relatedness and playing roles that enhance performance. As you create your community, you'll be building different types of connections between you and your residents, as well as between your residents themselves. Think back to the forming stage and some of the strategies we shared with you. Here are some of those ways that you can establish these connections. Have you caught the obvious metaphor? Your community is a web of connections. This web represents a performing community, but there will always be different tensions that challenge your performing community. Can you think of any? Roommate conflicts, policy violations, and vandalisms can cause some tension on your web. You may also have disengaged residents who aren't interested in participating in your floor community. On the other hand, you may have the extremely enthusiastic or involved resident that always demands your attention. These tensions can happen at any point in the year and impact the way that your community is performing. As an RA, your role will be to identify and navigate these tensions to get your community back to the performing phase. I bet you're asking yourself, what are some ways that you can identify tensions that impact your community? Well, we have several strategies to help you. First, talk to your residents. These conversations can be really revealing. Informal observations. You're going to be living on your floor, so the behaviors that you observe will help you understand what's going on. Base conversations. We talked about these earlier in the presentation, but base conversations are key to getting to know your residents and getting to know what they're thinking about the community. The RA feedback survey. At the end of the first semester, your residents will have a chance to evaluate your performance. The feedback from that survey is very helpful in determining how to move forward in the year. And EBI. This is an institutional feedback survey that is conducted every year. Ask your RHD for more information. Is this presentation almost over? Well, you're right, it is. So that leaves only one final stage of group development.
Adjourning. During the adjourning phase, the group prepares to separate and seeks closure. Just as this presentation is coming to a close, your communities are also going to come to an end at the end of the year. Reflection is a very important part of completing any experience, so we want you to reflect a little now. So here's your to-do list to complete RA 101. After finishing this video, complete the RA 101 wrap-up, which is question 2 in this assignment in NYU classes. Then, write a letter to yourself. This is question 3 in this assignment in NYU classes.
We also wanted to let you know some things that will be new in the 2015 to 2016 academic year. The completely renovated Hayden Hall will reopen for first-year students. Residence halls in Manhattan and Brooklyn are available to all upper-class students regardless of school. For fall 2015 only, there will be a small group of students living in the Affinia Hotel on 31st Street. And finally, Carlisle Tower 1 is expected to close for renovations on December 23rd for the entire spring semester. So what are your next steps? Your community development plans, which your supervisor will provide, are due on July 17th. Over the summer, there are 2 modules that we would like you to complete, so you don't have to worry about them during August training. These 2 modules are found on NYU classes, and you will receive an email early June with more information. Fall training begins on Saturday, August 22nd at noon, and will run every day through Sunday, August 30th. We want to repeat that RA training lasts all day, every day, so please do not make plans with friends or family during this week.